Hi, Jeff Hicks with Realwired. Welcome to Indispensable Appraisers podcast. Today we're talking about the product focuser. What does that mean? Well, product focuser is, or product 2.0, is for commercial appraisers to consider taking another look at their format. Really just a fresh eye as if you were starting over. A lot of the commercial appraisal formats have their genesis in the 90s. We're talking 20, 30 years ago, and the format's really not changed all that much. And I'm not necessarily talking about the structure, going through the USPAP and all the stuff you need to have in an appraisal, but what would have to be true to get a 5-star rating on your commercial appraisals, right? So I think it's exciting to take a new look and throw away your appraisal format. Just start over and then reassemble what would it take to have the very best appraisal, right? So is it 20 pages? Does it have to be 200 pages? That's a big range, right? 80 pages, what's the sweet spot, right? So I think to determine how to improve your appraisal format, first you have to ask questions. So if you're an owner of an appraisal firm, I would schedule meetings and tell your staff what you're trying to do, which is revamp how you create your appraisals. Not just necessarily from a technology and process standpoint, that's a big part of it, but also how do you make it better, right? Every day, appraisers work very hard compiling their reports, and they obviously don't want to hear negative feedback, but there are reviewers and other readers of your product that wish you had more of something and less of something else. For the most part, or it could be inconsistency in reporting, right? So you have to start with the ask. So the best way to do that is to identify and actually write down and get feedback from typically reviewers, anybody that reads your appraisals. You have to ask and say, hey, what did you like about the appraisal? What did you not like about the appraisal? This might seem a little odd, but really, you need the people that read your report to give you some input. They may say things like, well, in your highest and best use, you kind of danced through, you put in some charts and graphs and from a brokerage firm, but you didn't really tie it to the subject. You just kind of danced through it. I'm looking at the pictures maybe of the subject, and the building looks really worn, and you just said average quality, and you kept going. You didn't mention any deferred maintenance. The building, there's a sign on the building that says for sale, but you didn't mention that. Really kind of low-hanging fruit that as appraisers, I think you can get very busy in creating a product, but you get fatigued when it comes to doing the best readability of the product, right? If you start with the end in mind, write your appraisals like you would want to read them. But to be fair to appraisers, there's a lot of time involved gathering the information, confirming the sales. And by the time they get to the income approach, a typical appraiser, you can see you can almost see the page where they get exhausted. Usually somewhere in the income approach, I'm talking about cap rate support, you can just see the fatigue kind of setting in there, right? But what's appropriate? Do you need expense comps? Do you need market extracted cap rates? What does your report need? So next stage of the product focuser, besides asking the questions, is creating the checklist, right? Identifying what are the areas that we need to improve on. Some of those areas might be the who, right? Especially in today's market where, especially office properties in different markets, who did you talk to? Typically it's a broker. When did you talk to them, right? Really the reader wants to know that you talk to somebody, especially today, right? So as you do the checklist, you create ideas or ideation. Sit with your staff and just whiteboard it, right? What are the areas that we can improve? And they may say, well, let's get rid of 14 pages of boilerplate that nobody reads anyway. Can we consolidate that into maybe 1 page, maybe 2 pages? Make the font smaller, what have you, right? Other ideation, you maybe select somebody on your group that's really great at report presentation. new font, new colors, new logos, new design. But again, it's not to make it just pretty. It's to make it, wow, this is readable. It's easy. I can tell where all the things are. Everything is just about right. It's not a 12-page neighborhood, and it's not a 2-paragraph neighborhood. It's the balance for a reader to go, wow, each section was thought out properly. So part of the ideation is break that appraisal down into parts. And this is where you bring in technology and process to produce a better report much quicker. So as you break the appraisal down, it's almost like breaking it down to a pizza, right? Every appraisal has the same ingredients. They're just baked differently. Some taste better than others, right? You've got your dough, you've got your pepperoni, you've got your cheese, you got your, onions. So as you break it down into the parts, how do you make each part amazing, right? So you take, for example, highest and best use. What makes an excellent highest and best use? I'm sure you've seen, especially as a reviewer, if your highest and best use is a page and a half and it says nothing, that's not great either. I've also seen highest and best uses that might be 15 pages long with lots and charts and charts and charts. It might be excellent, but at the other end of the spectrum, I think you have reader fatigue, right? So there's a balance between, for example, if I'm describing a zoning, do I really need to have 3 pages of zoning? No, your job really is to consolidate, summarize, abbreviate, and bring to the reader the bite-sized chunks of what matters to what you're doing, right? So that does create the need for a library, but a library of very concise but meaningful information, right? So maybe that's zoning descriptions, your neighborhoods, your market overviews, and really doing a great job of tying the subject to the market. So part of this ideation, sitting with your staff, is how do we make it look better? How do we make it more readable? How do we reduce errors, right? If we say the value of the property is $3 million on page 12, but at the end it says 3.2 million. So you do need some technology, some report writing software, a database, so you can leverage the confirmation of sales with your appraisers, even down to the comps, right? Part of the ideation might be, I think Jeff does an okay job on confirming his sales. They're typically 2 pages, but Stan over there, his comp write-ups are a half a page. Or I'll call him Jack. Jack's write-ups are 3.5 pages long. That might be a little bit too much. How do you get consistency even in something as basic as comp verification? But you can use a database, highlight certain fields that are mandatory, give a boilerplate of the remarks of a comp write-up, right? And I think if you leave different people to confirm the sales and don't communicate through ideation what an awesome comp looks like. Does the remarks need to regurgitate the obvious stuff? Should it be long? Should it be short? What should you talk about? So in ideation, you sit around and you say, what makes an awesome comp as an example? So one format that might work for you is, and again, every comp write-up, let's say it's an improved sale. Where is it located, right? What is it? Describe the site. How big is it? Signalized intersection, not signalized intersection, maybe traffic counts. The building, square footage, when was it built, what's the condition, what's the use, who bought it, why did they buy it, who sold it, and actually look up the LLCs, make sure it's not interrelated or non-arm's length. What was the sale price? And then the sales history, right? That basic format, obviously include cap rates and tenant bases and anything else in there, but whatever format you specify, the bullet points, you communicate that with your staff that each of your comp write-ups are consistent, right? Because that's great as a reviewer. You want to read like, oh, wow, this really is tight. This is great information. So part of the ideation might be identifying what other areas can we improve on. Again, the goal is how do we get a 5-star appraisal format? What's it take? And I know we don't do 5 stars. This is an Amazon, but you should write it like you want to read it, right? So if you do a SWOT analysis of your appraisal format, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? right? If you start backwards, the threats might be your reviewers have to hunt through your appraisal to find the sections that they need. And that might create a vendor management where they put you down on the list where you get fewer bids because they just don't like your format, but they don't really want to tell you. That's one idea. So other areas of opportunities might be what we're talking about, which is, wow, this appraisal firm really put some energy into this format, redid it. This is a great format. I can find everything I need. It's a balanced writing style. You can tell they use a lot of process and technology for report consistency, right? So all of those are going to become your strengths, right? Just a new format, used consistently, reduction of typos and errors, and you might have a checklist by client. Part of your ideation might be, we have, let's say you do bank work or this client, we'll call them bank A, B, and C. Bank A, make sure you talk about these things. They really want you to talk about these specific things. I don't know, remaining economic life, what have you. Bank B, they really want to see interviews with brokers that's relevant to the property type you're appraising. Bank C, I don't know, they want insurable value. Just make sure you don't miss the obvious, which is the engagement letter, right? That's the easiest thing not to miss. And that's part of the ideation. So the next step is action. How do you do that? Well, if you have this great idea and you don't do it, that's a waste of time. So part of the action plan of the product 2 focuser would be give yourself a timeline, let's say 4 months, and put people in charge of certain things. You might have somebody in charge of the overall design, the look and feel, the charts, the headers, the colors, the logos, all that stuff. You might have somebody else that's in charge of the analysis, somebody that's awesome at presenting a great analysis, adjustment grids, yada, yada, yada. And perhaps you have a third person, maybe for readability. How easy is it to read as a reviewer or an external reader, right? Is it concise? Is it balanced? So again, the goal is what would have to be true for your appraisal to have a 5-star? So retaking the format of asking, how do you make an excellent appraisal? Creating the checklist to identify the areas of improvement, and then identify the areas that need to be addressed through the SWOT analysis, and then take action, I think will help improve the quality of your appraisal report. I think it'll be something you're proud of, that you're probably tired of looking at the same format and cranking it out for years as well. So why not make it look amazing? Anyway, that's it for Indispensable Appraisers podcast. Hope you have an awesome week. Thanks, guys. Bye.